All right, we're going to do a video analysis here on Daniel. He is brand new to the program. We're going to compare him to Tim Collins. Although they have a little bit of a different arm angle, we're just going to use Tim Collins below as a reference point because of his elite level mechanics and similar body type. Tim Collins was 5'6", 5'7", throwing 97, 98 from the left side, pitching the major leagues. An incredible story. If you don't know about Tim, please look it up. Is very inspiring, especially if you're an undersized pitcher. So here we go. Let's take Daniel into his leg lift and through his follow through. Okay. Pretty solid stuff. So what I like right here is when Daniel comes up into his balance point, right? Leg lift to balance point. Looks like he's got everything going towards home plate, right? In terms of his eyes, his glove has a good tuck, right? Right here. Arm getting into a pretty decent position. However, I do think that he can lead with his hip a little bit more. So Daniel ends up in this position right here, right, where it looks like from this angle, it looks like his arm is going behind him, which is causing his shoulder to open up to go behind him. And he's leaning forward with his upper body. And in this position here, his hips are slowly opening up. So if you just take a look at this position here, it doesn't look that strong. Right, you don't look super strong in that position compared to Tim. Now, Tim has a huge leg kick. I'm not recommending you do this. But what Tim does a really good job of is leading with his hip. So you don't have to have this super crazy leg kick. That was just Tim's style. But what you can see here is that when he gets up to that balance point, there's a shift in the hip. And you see him start to come down the mound. Right, you start to see that hip lead towards home plate. You go up a couple frames, you'll see that back leg really loaded nicely and his arm down in a good position. Right, his glove arm is getting ready to point towards home plate. His eyes are on his target as well. And as he gets out here, his hips are still closed. Right, you don't see that foot facing home plate yet. So if you compare these two positions between Daniel and Tim, you can see that Tim's position is so much stronger than Daniel's, which is a big reason why he's producing a lot more force into the baseball, right? So just right here, if we start checking boxes, we could look at the back leg loaded, right? Tim's back leg locked and loaded. Daniel's back leg, a little bit of flexion, not as loaded. Right? We look at the front leg. Tim's front leg is still pretty close. I know it's a little blurry, but it's still pretty close. You could see that his hips are still closed right here. His shoulders are facing back. For Daniel, you could see his foot is starting to leak open, right? Which is going to cause his hips to open up a little bit prematurely. And then arm-wise, you could see Daniel's arm is getting far away from his body. So now, if we take it a little further, right, so now Daniel's in a position here where his hips are pretty much flying open, right? You see his front foot is starting to face home plate. That means his front hip is starting to leak open, and his back leg is still attached to the rubber. It's still loaded. So that back hip has not fired. So you're missing out on power right there. Upper body-wise, your arm is straight behind you. Right, that's going to be a weaker position compared to down below. As you can see here with Tim, he uses the arm path we teach where we come out of the pocket, out of the glove. Right, if you watch him break his hands, he brings that ball down by his pocket. And then instead of going straight back, like you see up here, away from our body where we're weaker, Tim leads with his elbow up, right? So you'll see this position here. He comes down to the pocket, and then you see that elbow come up and he's getting into that good throwing position where he's here and he's here, almost at 90 degrees. Whereas Daniel, you see he comes all the way back. And then once he can't come back anymore, his arm turns over. Right, you'll see that right here. Can't go back anymore, you start going forward, arm turns over. Now he's in a position at front foot strike where his elbow is a little lower than his shoulder, it looks like. Now, I know Daniel has a low arm slot, so this might work for him a little bit, but we just have to be careful on how low our elbow gets because it can sap us of a lot of velocity and it can lead to arm issues. So even if you're a sidearm guy, you want to have that elbow at least even with the shoulder. Now, Tim down below, his arm slot is a lot different. He's a lot more over the top, so it wouldn't be fair to totally compare it. And I know the video quality isn't super great, but what we see here in this position for both of them, right, is we see a 90-degree angle, or close to a 90-degree angle for Tim. Good throwing position. You can see his head is on his target. His glove is tucking into him nicely. His hips are completely open, right? His back leg is extended off the mound. He's stable in that front leg, right? Compared to Daniel, where Daniel, it looks pretty stable in that front leg, right? Very similar. The back leg, since it didn't properly fire to go forward, you kind of just fell forward, never fully opened up that hip. We're seeing the eyes on target, which is awesome. We're seeing the glove tuck into the body, which is awesome. And I'm seeing that the arm, right, if we go back a couple frames right here, your arm was way behind you, and now you have to compensate and drop the elbow a little bit in order to get in time out in front. So you end up in a position here where because your elbow is lower and your arm was late to the party, so to speak, you end up pushing the ball where you're here. It looks like you're almost throwing a pie in a sense, right? Compared to Tim, again, I know a little different arm slot, but you can see how when he comes through, he lands firm on that front leg, and then that trunk launches forward. So as that trunk launches forward, this front leg locks out. So the energy that he put forward has to come back up through his body and out through the baseball, which is how he's able to produce so much power. Now, if we look at Daniel up top, he's very front leg dominant. So you see how that front leg swings open. Instead of driving open through the back leg, it swings open. He lands pretty firm. Arm a little bit low. And I know he's on an artificial mound, which is why it looks like he slips a little bit here. So we'll give him a pass on that, of course. But now as we come forward, we're not seeing any trunk launch, right? We're seeing pretty much straight up, right? Daniel's in this position here compared to, if you look down below, Tim is much more horizontal, right? His trunk is much more engaged. If you just look at the mobility in his hips, right, with the front leg locked out and stable, the hips coming forward in this regard, right, where we're here to here, you see the hips come up, boom, boom, hips coming up. Compared to Daniel up top, you see him land, slide a little forward on the artificial mound, and then as he releases, you'll see the hips start to follow through after ball release, right? So you'll see the hips start to come up. And then because you're not super stable in that front leg, partly due to mechanics and how you got there, as well as physical strength because of the force you're trying to produce, that energy isn't going out through the ball. It has to go somewhere. So this is extra wasted energy, I guess you could say. And as he follows through, you see that back heel come up. So that means there's extra energy that Daniel is not stabilizing. And because of that, the hips over-rotate. So when the hips over-rotate, because they didn't utilize all the energy, you end up going that way. So you'll see he falls off, and he's literally facing third base because of the over-rotation of the hips due to not firing them at the right time. They came through too late and not into the baseball. Okay, I know I threw a lot at you here, and there's a lot to focus on, but we're going to take this one step at a time. So, based on what I'm seeing here, this is what I want to see. I want to see you lead with this hip better, which you'll do through the Hershiser drill as well as the back leg slide drill. Okay, and the weight room stuff that's going to help you sink into that back hip more and be stronger in that position. I just want you to be conscious of it in your mechanics. Right? When we come out of the glove, instead of coming out and going straight behind our back, I want you to reach down to the pocket and then pull with the elbow up. You could still throw it a low arm slot there, but the arm path is going to be crucial for your timing. So you don't end up here where you're late and then pushing the ball out in front. You see how right here, the elbow is in front of the shoulder because you're pushing the ball forward. Compared to Tim down below, I know it's blurry, but if you just watch, see how he launches? He lands and launches forward. There's a launch from here to here. Boom, boom, producing a lot of power. So Daniel, you're definitely capable of this. We just have to build you into that type of pitcher where you keep this front leg closed, ride this hip down the mound, explode off that back hip, which you'll do through all the drills in the program, get this arm up into a good position, and then as you launch forward, stabilize that front leg, let that trunk come up, and you get power out through the ball. So overall, I think you're in a good spot in terms of a starting point, but there's a lot of potential here because there's a lot that can be improved upon. Let me know what you think. I'm happy to answer any questions or explain it further, but we're off to the races, my friend.